You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the Big Finish Sixth Doctor audio story, The End of the Line. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to get your very own Secrets of Doctor Who t-shirt or phone case or whatever merch you'd like by visiting sqpn.com/merch. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy called Let's Science. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/science. And finally, stick around to the very end. We do have some of your awesome listener feedback that we want to share and discuss. So stick around to the end for that. But first, we're going to be talking about the end of the line. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what we're talking about?
This week, the Sixth Doctor's final adventure or set of adventures begins, which is going to lead up to his regeneration. The Doctor is traveling in this episode with Mrs. Constance Clark, a codebreaker from 1944 England, and they find themselves in a strange fog-bound train yard where they meet a passenger named Tim Hope. There seem to be multiple different versions of the same train, with some or all of the passengers dead. Eventually, the Doctor realizes that they are at an interdimensional nexus, and the doorways between different realities are opening, causing trains from different dimensions to come together in the train yard. The fog is also causing people to go crazy and become homicidal, resulting in murders. The Doctor realizes that this realm was created ages ago by an interdimensional group known as the Parallel Sect, and the Parallel Sect put a group of android railroad workers in charge known as the Normans to be caretakers. Another person they meet is a train spotter named Keith Potter, but he turns out to be a body avatar of the Anthony Ainley Master, and he's the one causing the dimensions to collide. The Master then coerces the Doctor into opening machinery to allow more portals to open safely so that he can conquer the universe, actually the multiverse. But with the help of a Norman, the Doctor gets the machinery to start closing the portals, thus thwarting the Master's plan. Afterward, the Master flees and runs into Tim Hope. In private, Tim Hope reveals himself to actually be the Valeyard, who has been recharging himself in this realm. The Valeyard kills the Master's avatar and tells the unseen actual Master to leave the realm and to leave the Doctor alone, as he has his own plans for him. With the Master's plan thwarted, the fog starts lifting and the trains and surviving passengers start returning to their own dimensions. Not knowing that Tim Hope was the Valeyard, the Doctor suspects that there was more to Tim Hope than they realize and suspects they'll see him again. The end.
And they will.
So we have the Valeyard and the rail yard.
The Valeyard
how about that?
In the rail yard.
Now, that way, it's been a long time since I listened to these, but it would be nice if in the next episode they were in a brickyard or a shipyard or something like that.
Scrap yard.
And the Master with the caster. No, just kidding. So, this is, as we've mentioned before, the Sixth Doctors. It's called the Doctor Who: The Last Adventure on Big Finish, if you're looking for it there. And it's the Sixth Doctor's last adventure before regeneration, the one that he never got on TV.
Right.
So we're getting that.
Because they decided to fire Colin Baker from the part and hire Sylvester McCoy, and they invited Colin Baker to come back and do a regeneration story. Mm-hmm. But he said no. He offered to come back for a whole season or something, but he didn't want to do just one story. And so they began Sylvester McCoy's tenure with the Ronnie attacking the TARDIS and Sylvester McCoy in Colin Baker's costume and a wig laying on the floor regenerating. So there was no explanation. Fan theory was he hit his head on the TARDIS console and died.
Yeah.
But Big Finish, Colin Baker did a lot of work for Big Finish and really redeemed the Sixth Doctor after the abominable writing the BBC gave him. And so they decided to send him off properly by giving him a regeneration story proper.
Well, even just in this one, he's not as arrogant and insulting and bombastic as he was on TV. So, you can already see the difference here.
And this came out in 2015. So a much older Colin Baker. You can hear it in his voice, but you can still recognize him. So there's not much you can do with that. But
even though it's called The Last Adventure, Colin Baker still does the Sixth Doctor for Big Finish. He hasn't stopped making Sixth Doctor stories. It's just this has the last one chronologically.
Right. And speaking of voice, Constance Clark, who was his current companion, was voiced by Miranda Raisin, however you pronounce her last name, sorry, who was Tallulah, the dancer in Daleks Take Manhattan.
Yeah.
The really ditzy blonde with the really bad accent.
Totally did not hear that. She did a very ditzy New York accent in that one. So pretty good.
One of the characteristics of The Last Adventure, it's 4 parts, and we're going to be doing 1 part a week until we get it done. But one of the characteristics of it is it's set at different points in Colin Baker's tenure as the Sixth Doctor. So we're going to hear him traveling with multiple different companions. And this time we have Constance Clark. She's what's known as a Wren. That means she's a member of the Women's Royal Navy service in World War II. And she was a code breaker at Bletchley Park, which was kind of I guess a manor house where they did code breaking. They worked on the German Enigma machine and things like that. So she's part of that project. She's very smart. She's also she's also married. She's Mrs. Constance Clark. She does have a husband. He's not in this story, but she does have a husband, and she's very particular about being called Mrs. And I like her a lot. I think she's a great character. I like her better than some of the other companions that Big Finish has had for the Sixth Doctor. There's one companion who has this kind of high, screechy voice that's a woman named Flip. And I don't think she's in The Last Adventure.
She is.
Oh, great.
In the third one.
Okay, yeah. I'm not a fan of Flip, but I like Constance Clark. She's nice. She's very competent. She's very smart. She's self-assured. I like her.
Yeah. I liked the character. And the interesting thing is, this story was the first time fans had heard her, but it wasn't the first recorded. They just changed the release dates. And so what should have been her first appearance that explains who she is ended up getting put back. This came out in August, and I think that came out in November.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, the other companions that'll be with the Doctor in this will be Charlotte Pollard, which is in the next one, which is interesting, given that she's an Eighth Doctor companion that we've been hearing.
And there's a running issue because, Charlie is a companion that shouldn't exist because she was fated to die in the R101 crash, and the Doctor saved her. So she's a living time paradox. And one of the running themes with her travels with the Eighth Doctor is, how is he going to prevent the web of time from becoming undone because of this paradox? And in her travels, because she did travel with him for a good period, in her travels with the previous Sixth Doctor, how does she avoid contaminating the timeline?
Right.
Because so with the Eighth Doctor knows about the problem and she doesn't. And so he's trying to keep things together. Whereas when she travels with the Sixth Doctor, she knows about the problem and the Eighth Doctor doesn't. He doesn't know the Sixth Doctor doesn't know she's from his future. And so she's the one who has to keep things from going off the rails by controlling what he's allowed to know about her.
From her point of view, she's with the Sixth Doctor after her time with the Eighth Doctor. Okay. Yeah. That'll be interesting to know. Yeah.
With lashings of River Song thrown in.
Yeah. And then in the final one, we have the Doctor and Mel, which is going to be interesting. Which I'll be curious because is he with Mel at his generation? Oh, right. She's in the Ronnie.
Yeah, Mel is the prototype of River Song, who was a companion from the Sixth Doctor's future, and he meets her in the last part of Trial of a Time Lord, and then she's still there when he regenerates into Sylvester McCoy.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking forward to those, but we should probably deal with this one first as we go. But that's a good introduction to this four-part story, 4 stories of this. Well, whatever, the regeneration story. So it starts with these folks on a commuter rail in Britain. They're on their way to work. A lot of cities in America have the same sort of thing where people live in the suburbs and they're commuting into the city, and that's what we have as a basic commuter rail. It's pre-dawn, I guess, is the implication based the way they talk about it.
Yeah, they say it's 10 past 6 in the morning.
Okay, and there's a fog. There's a very thick fog that comes up.
It must be like December or something, because
10
past 6 in the morning, it's already light in a lot of places in North America.
Yep.
Although London and those parts are kind of like I think up by you, Father Cory, in your latitude.
Yeah, I can't remember, or it might even be a little bit higher, because I know Poland, which is a similar line of latitude, is actually like Calgary, Alberta.
Yeah, and
so
Boston. Yeah, Boston's like at Rome's latitude. So
and New York is at Spain's latitude.
Yep.
Right. So it will. Yeah, they will have. Man, I couldn't live like that where it doesn't get light until after 7 o'clock in the morning. Oh. Anyway,
we're used to it. Let's put it that way.
So they're riding in the rail on the train. It loses power and stops, and they get stuck there. And they also notice that everyone's watches have stopped as well, so they don't know what time it is. And there's a group of people on the train, including not a conductor, but what does he call himself? Customer service manager.
Yeah, it's his running gag.
Customer service manager.
Yeah.
But he's a conductor, and his name is Norman, and we will later meet other Normans who look identical but perform other tasks for the railroad.
Right. And so the passengers get off the train and get separated in the fog, and that's kind of how we start. And meanwhile,
some of them do.
Yes. And meanwhile, the doctor and Constance, Mrs. Clark, are also happen to be there in the fog. We don't see them showing up. They're just kind of there. And I think Mrs. Clark says you've gotten lost again, I think is how she puts it. And this is when they encounter one of the passengers from the train, this Tim Hope, which is an interesting name. I wonder, is it supposed to mean something, Tim Hope, you think?
Well, we'll see if they play it out with the Valeyard, but Hope is kind of the opposite of what the Valeyard is all about.
Right. That's true. And time seems to pass differently, and they encounter these different versions of the train, and that's when the doctor starts to figure out, like, there's more and more lines. So they're at a station, Kettering Station, I think they said.
Yep.
And there seems to be more and more rail lines being added to the platforms. If you've ever been to a train station, there are rail lines there.
It normally has 12, based on the knowledge the passengers have, because the doctor and Constance have just walked into the situation. They don't have local knowledge. But based on the knowledge of Tim Hope and other passengers, the station is supposed to have 12 platforms, and now it has 17, and it keeps growing, and we get 21 and 22 and so forth.
Right. And it's a sort of a visual allegory of a crossing point but in the multiverse, right?
Yep.
Where each track is a different universe, and so different versions of and we get to see like different versions of the rail car that the train that these people came off of, and one is ravaged and bloodied, like there's people been murdered on it, and so on and so forth.
And they don't give us the interdimensional solution initially. Since this is a time travel show, it's more normal to expect duplicates in terms of time travel. So like at one point they're walking around outside the trains, and they find the body of a dead passenger, and his name is Dave. Now, if you read the TARDIS wiki, for some reason, at least right now, it keeps referring to him as Danny. And whoever wrote the entry was asleep on that, I guess, because they keep calling him Danny, but his name is clearly Dave.
Right.
And Dave ends up dying. He's either already dead when they meet him, or they meet versions of him that are just about to die. And so he's kind of our initial creepy thing. And then they find another version of the train car with the windows shattered and everybody missing. And they go on board, and there are spots of blood and they keep talking about the spots of blood, and it's pretty creepy. You're on this deserted train car with spots of blood and all the windows smashed out. And since this is a time travel show, and the doctor says, how do you know it's not just a different train car? But Tim Hope says, I take this train into work every day. I know all the details. See, there's the parasol of one of the other regular passengers. It's pink with some kind of animal on it.
Pink elephants, I think.
Pink elephants, yeah. And he says, look, the eye on the toilet has been scratched out. And that means that if you think I love this, they don't make a point of it. But if you take the word toilet on the door and scratch out the eye, it's going to say to let, meaning for rent.
Yeah. That's a good point. I didn't think of that. That's a good one.
But because it's a time travel show, you're thinking, how do we know this isn't the same train car from the future and everyone's going to die?
Right.
But they eventually reveal it's parallel universes colliding.
Right. And so because they leave that car, they go back into the fog, and they think they get turned around again because they come back to the train, but this time it's the unblemished train car, which might be the original, might not be, that we saw earlier because, multiverse, from our knowledge of the end of the episode. And they find it, it's undamaged, but Dave is dead. I keep thinking of that Cheech and Chong skit. Dave's not here.
Yeah, Dave's not here, man.
I thought you were going to say, you keep thinking of, you killed Kenny.
Yeah.
That's the other one. And but then Dave shows up banging on the window. It's like, can you imagine if you'd seen Dave die and now he's at the window banging again? We, as listeners, we're probably thinking he's from a different period in time. And then he gets dragged off into the fog and killed. So it's really creepy.
And the way that happens, because he's begging to be let into the train. And at this point, Norman, the conductor, is like, I'm not allowed to. Policy is I don't let anybody on or off the train. My first concern is my passenger safety. And the doctor is like, out of my way, man. Let this guy in. But Norman stops him. And before the doctor is able to get out to open to get the door open to let Norman onto the train, we hear Norman die again. And the doctor is really cold about it, as he died while we stood there and did nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Dave. We have two dead Daves. We have Dave, the one that I think
on the tracks.
Alice reports that she saw him or heard him die. Then we have the Dave who was at the window who get dragged off and killed. And so then Norman's going to lock Constance and the doctor
in the bathroom.
In the bathroom.
Yeah. It's for rent. May as well use it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's occupied by another dead Dave who's in the toilet. And now they're really confused. It's like, is this the dead Dave that Alice said that she had heard get killed, or what is this? And
for a moment, suspicion falls on Alice because the doctor proposes a way that doesn't involve time travel and that doesn't involve the multiverse, that she could be responsible for what they've seen. And it's kind of a crazy explanation, but it's enough to cast suspicion on her.
Right. Now, there is actually a funny line here, because at this point, with three dead Daves, I think it's Tim who says, "I'm glad I'm not called Dave."
Yeah.
That was a good line. And
also, there's another good line as they start to realize the parallel world's nature of all this. I forget who, it's probably Alice, says, it's like Professor X. And Professor X is Doctor Who, the TV show Doctor Who, that exists as a surrogate for Doctor Who in the Doctor Who universe.
Right.
So it's a self-referential thing about, we have this TV show about this mysterious scientist called Professor X who travels to all these worlds and solves problems.
Yeah. So I think it's not Alice, but Hillary. I think I got it mixed up. And Hillary is the one who heard Dave die. And so the doctor confronts Hillary and says, you had the opportunity and you've got blood on you. So you've probably are somehow involved in Dave's death. And so Hillary starts to talk, and she's a Ms., I think she says, and she's
very
done
insistently, yeah.
Yes, and she's done with misogyny. And I missed my interview out of the rat race, and men holding me down by this train being stopped. And she starts getting more and more angry, and she admits to killing Dave, and she gets full of rage and says something about liking killing now, and then she feels she has lots of resentments about being a woman in a man's world, and she's worked harder than everybody else. She shows up earlier and stays later at work. She's put in all this work at the office to outcompete the men, and it all came down to a job interview that this momentous job interview she was going to have, and that was this morning. But because the train broke down, I missed my appointment. So she's been building up to this appointment for years, apparently, and now she's missed it. And I was telling Dave what happened, and he told me to calm down, and so I killed him. Right. Mm-hmm. It's like as if that made all the sense in the world. Don't tell a woman ever to calm down.
Well, not this kind of woman, certainly.
No. I did forget to mention, because we mentioned him already, Keith, who is you mentioned in the recap, the body avatar for the Master. And so by this point, the Doctor and Constance had encountered him in the fog. So he's Keith Potter, train spotter. A little bit of the Master's wordplay there. And so he's here, and he's going to take Hillary into the fog to the train station. And
he's doing a really great job. I mean, you would never dream this guy is the Master until the reveal.
Right.
He's a total train geek. That is, trains is what he is about. He knows everything about trains, and he has the most local knowledge of anybody about how the train system works, which they play to their advantage.
Yes.
But then once Hillary has admitted that she is homicidal, she wants to leave and go to the station, and they're inclined to let her because she's homicidal. Right. And she wants to take Keith with her. And at first they're balking at that, but Keith is like, no, it's okay. It's okay. And they're thinking, and the Doctor explicitly thinks there's more to Keith than meets the eye. He's more capable than he seems. And what they're thinking is he's going to use his superior knowledge of the train station to get away from her.
Right.
But when she and he get onto the train station, onto the platforms, they're talking, and he quizzes her about what happened. And once he gets the information he wants, he says, "Okay, I have no more use for you." And then we hear this special effect, which is apparently the tissue compression eliminator running.
Right.
And he shrinks her to death.
Ugh.
Although we don't know at this time that that's exactly what's happened. That will be revealed later.
Right. We just hear her scream and die. And that, yes. And so around this point is when we start to get the Doctor's realization that they're on a reality nexus, a dimensional interchange, and that parallel universes, which by the word parallel are not supposed to intersect, are intersecting. And we get the question. So what's causing the universes to go out of alignment here? What's making them cross? And so the Doctor goes with Keith, who's still Keith at this moment, to the station. And they have a discussion about different dimensions, different universes, some that are more dark and some that are less civilized, I think. And I thought that was an interesting discussion.
One of the things they talk about is darkness from other universes bleeding into good ones. And this is apparently lifted. I've never actually seen it, but there was a Doctor Who side project other than the TV show called Doctor Who in the Dark Dimension. And apparently this concept is lifted from that.
Oh,
I've heard about Doctor Who in the Dark Dimension. I've read about it, but I've never. I guess it never got made, if I'm remembering correctly. But they used that concept from it, and the reveal on the Master is nice because they meet another Norman, and this Norman is like wearing overalls, so he's not a conductor. He's like an engineer or something. or a station maintenance man or something.
Yeah.
And the Normans are all very officious. They are all very much into what the rules are. They're pleasant, but they are into the rules. and they will not deviate from their rules. And Norman refers to Keith as master. And the doctor says, Keith is your master? And Norman says, oh, not my master. He's the master, the definite article, so he says. And it's really nice to have that, the definite article, which normally the doctor uses for himself, thrown in the doctor's face and applied to the master.
In fact, doesn't he do it in this very story? Like at one point, I'm not a doctor, I'm the doctor. I think he actually says that earlier in the story.
But he does use the line, the definite article. Matter of fact,
Yes.
it goes all the way back to the first Doctor, if I remember correctly.
Right. I guess the actor who does Keith's voice does a great job, because Keith transforms from Keith Potter, Trainspotter, to very much the snooty, the master voice that
the Anthony Ainley master. Yeah.
It's subtle but really good.
It is. It's obviously not the same physical voice, but he assumes the mannerism and the speech idioms of Anthony Ainley, who had this kind of mustache twirling supervillain, demeanor that was different than Roger Delgado's master.
Yes.
And you can hear, even though this is a different physical voice, you can hear that Anthony Ainley element in there.
Yep.
Unfortunately, Anthony Ainley couldn't appear in Big Finish because he passed on.
Right. So we have Alice, who I was thinking about before. Also, she's another passenger on the train, and she also goes crazy and kills somebody with her brain, apparently.
She also smashes out windows and things like that. And she's also we just like with Hillary, when she recounted how she killed Dave, there's this progression of disordered thought that gets to the point of being homicidal, but there's a progression leading to it. And under the influence of the fog, which has been impregnated by the dark dimension, I guess, or some kind of dark dimensional energy, she starts to fall under its influence, and she's initially sane, and then she starts thinking about multiverses and how there could be these parallel versions of us. And isn't that fascinating? These other people who are like me, but just slightly different, and anything could happen. You could do anything. And then from that, she gets into, you could do anything. I could kill you right now, and it wouldn't matter. And it's fascinating in just this brief space to watch how her mind goes from innocently thinking about parallel dimensions to, I could totally kill you right now. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah.
Very creepy.
Well, and both her and Hillary, they attack with like a psychic blast, like you said, kill her with their mind. So you hear this again, the special effects noise, and Norman's like, stop it, and nose bleeding and all this kind of stuff, and she kills him.
Right. Yeah, it's Norman. Yeah, on the train, the Norman who's on the train, who she kills. Yeah, and it's kind of wild because Constance is there and she's trying to like talk her down a bit, and she's like, no, you can't do it. Like, there's still consequences if you do a thing. Like there's like, because Alice is talking about there's no consequences. She says, no, if you do a thing, there's still consequences, and just trying to reason with a person who's losing their mind. And I think it's maybe more effective in audio like that because your brain can supply a lot. So it's really an effective bit of writing and acting here as you kind of hear her go crazy. It's wild. So the doctor, meanwhile, finds the nerve center inside the station. So he finally gets to the station, and he says the interior reminds him of Gallifrey, the Time Lords, and partly I think because of the technology for crossing dimensions. And we find out that the Normans are a species of robot created by a race
parallel
called
sect.
the Parallel Sect, which is unique to this story, right? They're not.
Yeah.
And they were not time traveling, but dimension traveling or universe travelers who could like cross universes like you could cross the street. And they had taken upon themselves to keep up the pathways between the universes.
They would create wormholes, quote unquote. Obviously not the same thing as wormholes, but links between the different dimensions, and then they could use these hubs like they're at this junction, this railroad junction, to travel from dimension to dimension.
Right. And Norman says they're gone now, and so Norman says everything's under new management, which is when he reveals the master's in charge, and says we have orders to open up all the barriers between the dimensions. And so the master's plan here is to use the dimension crossing ability to take over all the dimensions. Like, I mean, so he's no longer satisfied with taking over one universe. He needs to take over all of them because it's
pretty much
he's the master. Okay. And then Keith is a remote control avatar. So basically a flesh robot drone.
Yeah, something like that. The master is nearby in his TARDIS, which is disguised as a ticket machine. And he has Keith Potter as, I guess, flesh. He could be a robot, but it's either flesh or robot, he could be a hologram, but he's some kind of avatar representation that the master is controlling from inside his TARDIS.
Okay. There wasn't really any indication whether it's a real person that he took over or not, I don't think.
No.
They didn't answer that question.
Okay.
They didn't even raise it.
Meanwhile, Constance and Tim have left the train to go out to the station to go find out whoever is screaming in the fog or whatever. And then
and Tim gives Constance his coat, presumably because it's chilly or something.
Right, which is an important element here. And they get to the station, but Norman there won't let them in until they trick him into, going to check out something. Hey, I think there's something going on over there. You won't go in through this door that you're not allowed to go through. Oh, no, we would never do that. And then as soon as his back is turned, they go through it. So the master has the doctor there because he needs the doctor, a Time Lord, to implement some sort of protocol that will probably kill the doctor, but will be the final solution to opening up the universes.
So the way they explain it, there's some kind of connection between the Parallel Sect and the Time Lords. It's almost as if, and they may have meant it to be this way, but it's almost as if the Time Lords are like descendants of the Parallel Sect. In any event, they have some kind of, their time travel ability has resulted in them having some kind of biological factor that the Parallel Sect also had. And the Parallel Sect technology is biometrically cued to the Parallel Sect. So you need this biological factor in order to be able to operate the technology. And so in order to get since they're all gone, in order to open the gates between the universes further safely, you need to be a Time Lord. And the Master doesn't want to get out of his TARDIS because it's dangerous. And Keith Potter is not a Time Lord, so he doesn't have the ability to operate the machinery. So the Master tricked the Doctor into coming here so that he could manipulate him into implementing the open the gateways safely thing.
Right. And Constance's arrival at this point in the story in the station gives the Master the leverage to get the Doctor to do what he wants by threatening her life. He holds her at the end of the tissue compression eliminator. So the Doctor goes off with one of the Normans, and the Doctor's solution is to convince the Normans that they need to obey their original programming, that what the Master has them doing is in violation of their programming. And since, as we've established, the Normans are very much about the rules, just pointing out to them that they're breaking the rules is enough to get them to undo what the Master has done, which
this shows the fact that the Master really didn't think this through, because of course the Doctor is not going to help him, even if he has his companion at gunpoint. He's
Right.
going to actually work to undermine it, because what is the master going to do? By the time the doctor fixes the problem, the master can't turn that back around again.
Right. And this is about the point where I forget how this happened now. I have in my notes, but I didn't write the context. There's Tim, which turns out Tim was carrying, and Constance, because she's wearing Tim's jacket, finds in his pocket a dimensional stabilizer from a TARDIS.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
that's what the doctor needs in order to like get rid of the fog and put everything to rights after the doorways start closing.
right.
Yep.
And that's when he can, they get away from the master. The master isn't gone yet. Keith is still there, but they get away from him. And Tim ends up confronting Keith, the master, and that's when he reveals himself to be the Valeyard.
Mm-hmm.
And the actor changes. He like pulls off a mask, and all of a sudden it's the actor who played the Valeyard. So the voice completely changes.
Michael Jaston, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he reveals that he's there. It just they happen to be there at the same place.
Mm-hmm.
He came to the dimensional nexus to restore himself after his last encounter with the Doctor. Do we know what that was?
I haven't looked it up, but encounters with the doctor tend to not go well for the Valeyard.
I mean, it could be was the last of the Valeyard, or the trial of the Valeyard,
trial of the Valeyard,
which we've talked about before. So
right, that's true.
Yeah, the Valeyard doesn't appear that often in Big Finish. I wish they do a little more with him, actually. One that I haven't yet heard is they have him in the Time War, which makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
To have the War Valeyard, or for the Time Lords to activate the Valeyard and have him doing stuff in the Time War. That makes total sense.
Yep.
And he's still a mystery figure. We're still not sure who he is, which is fine. Yeah.
They originally said that he's between the Doctor's 12th and final incarnation, but we're past that now.
Yeah.
In the Stephen Moffat era, they still have indicated he's somewhere in the Doctor's future. The Great Intelligence tells the Paternoster Gang and Clara that the Doctor will be known by many names, including the Valeyard, and his future is not bright.
Well,
right.
It just turns out there's a lot more regenerations between the 12th and final regenerations.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got the 14th Doctor now with the David Tennant. Who's to say something doesn't happen between that and the 15th Doctor? There's lots of possibilities when you've got the unlimited regenerations now, and anything apparently goes. So the Doctor and Constance never actually find out that Tim is not what he says he is. A law clerk is how we. Which is a bit ironic, given that the Valeyard was the prosecutor in the Doctor's trial of a Time Lord.
They do realize by the end that there's much more to him. He had a dimensional stabilizer from a TARDIS.
Yes. So this is something, but they don't know who, which is interesting. So that's all I have. Father Cory, do you have any other notes on this story?
There's a great line. Last line by Constance is about how the master's TARDIS hides, in the shadows, and you don't recognize it, just like the master, while the Doctor's TARDIS stands out, like a sore thumb, just like the Doctor.
Yes. And then he says defensively that his outfit is the height of fashion on some worlds.
Yeah, she's like something about you'll have to take me there someday.
Yes.
Not now.
Right. Jimmy, any final thoughts?
No, I thought it was a good story. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, same here. I'm looking forward to the others. All right. We do have the feedback that I mentioned. This feedback was on our episode 314 on the Deadly Assassin. That was that 4th Doctor story. Robert Hawkins commented on YouTube. We had been talking about the Talons of Wang Chiang and coming up soon. And he said that the Talons is the same season as Deadly Assassin and was produced by Philip Hinchcliffe as his swan song. But his contract wasn't not renewed. We had, I think, discussed how it wasn't renewed. But it wasn't that his contract wasn't renewed. He was simply transferred over to Target, a BBC police drama. Unless you were persona non grata as a producer, such as John Nathan Turner 12 years later, the BBC would always find something else for you. And Hinchcliffe was seen as an excellent producer. So,
yeah, I saw an interview with Philip Hinchcliffe where he was talking about his departure from the show. And if memory serves, he was somewhat ambiguous about it. That I think he thought the Mary Whitehouse objections to the deadly assassin may have played a role in his departure, but it wasn't just as simple as that, is my memory.
Okay.
Well, and you could still say that his contract wasn't renewed to be on Doctor Who, but they gave him a new contract with another show. So
Right, exactly. That's one way of putting it. Excellent. And thank you, Robert, for your feedback. We love to get everyone's feedback and share it on the show. So we'd like to take a moment now to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Anthony R., Mary G., Bridget C., Barbara T., and Anthony C. Their generous tax-deductible donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. So that's it for us this time. We would love to hear what you think of this Big Finish story, The End of the Line. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can watch us in the Secrets of Doctor Who in video on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, and leave a comment there as well. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode in the Sixth Doctor's last adventure, called The Red House. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Tom.
Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
thank you, Don.
And once again, I'm Don Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, my sense of direction may be eccentric, but never concentric.